G'day guys. Lately I've been going through a bit of a square watch phase. For some reason I've found myself longing to add one of those properly iconic watches to my collection. The Cartier Tank perhaps, or TAG Monaco come to mind. Unfortunately my bank account said G-Shock Square, so that's where I began. But I'm doing alright. I don't need to start right at the bottom. The channel's growing, life is good. I thought perhaps I could treat myself. Not to just any G-Shock Square, I wanted the best one. The absolute pinnacle of the 5000 style. I thought tough solar, Bluetooth, maybe an extra couple of $100 on top. And that's when I discovered that I'm not doing nearly as well as I thought I was. Because apparently the ultimate square G-Shock is not a few $100s. It's 6,000. It has finishing rivaling Grand Seiko, and it is the pinnacle of what Casio thinks a watch should be. So today, we're taking a look at what may be the strangest luxury watch out of Japan. If not, the world. Welcome to the weird world of Grand Casio. So, this is the watch that completely derailed my humble search for a premium G-Shock Square, the MR-G B5000. At a glance, it is quite obviously a G-Shock. More specifically, it has the familiar square shape, 4 buttons, brick pattern, and the general appearance of something designed to survive being repeatedly run over. It is one of the most recognizable watch designs Casio has ever made. And yes, the price really is $5,999 Australian dollars. And that's where my brain began to struggle, because $6,000 is not just expensive for a Casio. That's just expensive. It puts you among proper Swiss mechanical watches. It buys you an entire drawer of ordinary G-Shocks. In fact, I'll put the conversion rates on screen somewhere now, and I want you guys to start thinking about what you'd buy instead. And when you do, I want you to drop it in the comments below, because I bet we're going to have a pretty good looking list down there. But here, at 6K, what perplexes me most is underneath all the titanium, polishing, and premium construction, this is still recognizably the same basic idea as the affordable resin square. It's still quartz, it's still digital, it still has an alarm, stopwatch, and countdown timer. So what exactly has Casio done here? Is this genuinely an attempt at a luxury watch? To answer that, we first need to understand where MR-G actually sits within the slightly ridiculous Casio family tree. Because the journey from an F91W to this thing might be the greatest case of lifestyle creep in all of consumerism. Right down at the bottom, you have the classic Casios, calculator watches, world times, little silver digitals, and of course, the F91W. A watch that costs about as much as lunch, weighs approximately nothing, and has somehow become one of the most recognizable watches ever made. It's cheap, reliable, and infinitely replaceable. That is the Casio most people know. From there, the catalogue begins to branch out. You have Edifice, where Casio adds metal cases, motorsport styling, and so much detail on the dial it makes every watch feel like it's monitoring a nuclear reactor. There is Pro Trek, built for hiking, climbing, and people who like knowing the atmospheric pressure while standing in a shopping centre. And then there is Oceanus, a more refined, mostly JDM collection where Casio starts playing with titanium, polished surfaces, and considerably more grown-up designs. Oceanus is arguably where Casio first begins behaving like a traditional luxury watch company. But then, over on a completely different branch of the family tree, you have the oddball uncle, G-Shock. The collection created around the belief that a watch should not be impacted simply because its owner makes poor decisions. G-Shock has become so enormous that were it independent, it could probably rival Casio itself. At the affordable end, you have the familiar resin models. Simple, practical watches you can wear to the beach, the gym, a building site, or anywhere else you would rather not take your nice watches. then the price begins creeping upwards. You add things like solar charging, radio-controlled timekeeping, Bluetooth, metal bezels, stainless steel cases and bracelets. Eventually you arrive at the full metal G-Shocks, where the basic square starts looking surprisingly premium, but it's still something you'd buy without having to convene a family meeting. Above these sits MTG. MTG stands for Metal Twisted G-Shock, referring to Casio's combination of metal and resin in the shock-resistant structure. This is where the watches become larger, more elaborate, and considerably more expensive. Things like carbon, metal, complex case structures, premium finishing, the G-Shock formula starts becoming less tool watch and more exoskeleton. And then sitting above everything else, you have MR-G. According to Casio, the MR stands for Majesty and Reality, which is a name, I guess. Either way, my brain has completely wired itself to read it as Mr. G, so that's what I'll be calling it for the rest of this video. Mr. G is the top of the G-Shock range, and in price terms, it's the very top of Casio watchmaking, which means the same company that will sell you this for the price of this will also sell you this for the price of this. The F91W is resin and looks like it came out of a vending machine. Mr. G uses hardened titanium, is assembled from dozens of individual components, and polished using techniques usually discussed in high-end boutiques. One is the watch equivalent of catching the bus. The other is also catching a bus, except that bus is made from hardened titanium, assembled from dozens of individual components, and polished using techniques normally discussed in high-end boutiques. So, let's climb aboard that bus and try to understand what exactly Casio has done to justify charging Grand Seiko money for the ticket. Well, the first thing you do is take something that's relatively simple and make it extremely complicated. On the regular G-Shock square, the protective bezel is one piece. That is far too straightforward for Mr. G. Here, the bezel alone is divided into 25 separate components. 25 individual pieces, all manufactured, finished, and then assembled separately to create the shape of something Casio has been making out of plastic since 1983. Even the little recessed dimples on the bracelet are made from separate components, because apparently stamping them into the link was insufficiently majestic or realistic. To be fair, there is a reason for this beyond giving Casio something impressive to put in the brochure. The square has many recessed edges, sharp transitions, and all sorts of awkward little corners that would be extremely difficult to polish properly if the bezel remained one piece. By breaking it apart, Casio can polish each component individually before final assembly, and Casio's not just giving these a quick once-over on the buffing wheel. They use Solar's polishing to create a flat, distortion-free mirror surface alongside the brushed finishing. And if Solar's sounds familiar, it should. Solar's is the name that became Zuratsu in Japanese, the same polishing technique now practically synonymous with Grand Seiko. So yeah, the Grand Seiko thing kind of started as a joke for the thumbnail, but when I actually started looking into these, it became pretty real. I'm just going to slip in this quick begging portion here where I ask you to subscribe. As always, if you've made it this far into the video, you clearly like these kind of weird watch videos, and I'd love to have you join us for more. Please subscribe, and a like would go so far to helping the channel out. If you've already done those, that is amazing. Thank you so much. That's all from post-recording me. Back to that 25-piece bezel. Splitting the protective bezel into 25 beautifully polished pieces creates a fairly obvious problem. G-Shocks, by their nature, are supposed to absorb impact. A relatively simple resin shell is very good at that. 25 pieces, however, sound more like 25 opportunities for something to become loose, bent, or like my AirPods, when dropped, launched across the room. So Casio developed what it calls the multi-guard structure. Flat springs and silicone buffers sit between the individual components, allowing the bezel to absorb impacts while protecting both the watch and all of its tiny little body panels. It's kind of like a crumple zone in your car, except instead of protecting occupants, it protects what is still fundamentally a digital Casio module. The first line of defense though is obviously the case materials, and here Casio found making the watch from normal titanium a bit too pedestrian. The case and buttons use Ti64, a titanium alloy most brands would be happy to call premium. But Mr. G doesn't stop there. The bracelet is DAT55G, which, despite sounding like a reference number, is actually an alloy roughly 3 times harder than pure titanium. Facing you, the bezel is Cobarion, a Japanese cobalt chromium alloy around 4 times harder than pure titanium, which can be polished to a shine said to be comparable to platinum. All of this comes together in Casio's premium production line at Yamagata Casio in Japan. I like to think that somewhere inside there is still a quiet corner turning out calculator watches courtesy of Casio's finest ateliers. But take a step back though, and Mr. G has spent the exotic metals, specialist polishing, and absurdly complicated construction budget just to reproduce something that looks exactly like this G-Shock square. The brick pannon remains, the red line, the exposed lug screws, even the buttons look just as unusable. It still looks very much like a watch you might wear while changing your tire. They've not made it elegant, they've just taken an already awesome watch and elevated the finishing to the highest level. And I think that's what Mr. G gets spot on. It's so far from being embarrassed about being a Casio. It's not trying to persuade anyone that quartz is secretly mechanical or that its digital display was inspired by moonlight reflecting across a frozen Japanese lake. It's still obviously branded G-Shock proudly on the bezel. It just happens to be a G-Shock where every exterior component has been given the executive package. And I emphasize exterior because underneath all that titanium, Cobarion, silicon cushioning, and Solar's polishing, there's still a digital Casio module. And that's where justifying $6,000 becomes considerably more difficult. In their defense, it isn't literally the same module Casio drops into the entry-level squares. The Mr. G gets a dedicated version that includes a gold-plated retainer plate, designed to reduce electrical resistance. Which certainly sounds premium, I guess. Although I'm not sure anyone said that's exactly what they were missing on their G-Shock. Functionally though, it's giving you the premium Casio package. It's got things like tough solar, Bluetooth connectivity, and multiband 6, which for me in Australia is actually dead on arrival. You also get things like world time, a stopwatch, countdown timer, 5 alarms, and a perpetual calendar. So it's a very capable watch. The problem is that capability is not remotely exclusive to Mr. G. If you only care about functionality, tough solar, Bluetooth, multiband 6, and an actually better memory and pixel display are all available on the BX5600 for about $400. So those extra thousands are not going on substantially more timekeeping. What you seem to be paying for is the extraordinary object Casio has constructed around that timekeeping. Now, I've focused on the 5000 series because the square is the G-Shock icon, and is the watch that dragged me into this entire mess, but Mr. G extends across the wider G-Shock catalogue. There are full analog models, Casiokes, and 1000 series watches. Every one of these could probably support its own video, but today I'm sticking with the icon. Although I do have to mention, the range currently culminates in this, frankly insane, $14,999 Frogman, and it's currently out of stock. Which doesn't necessarily mean someone bought one, but it does mean somebody might have bought one. But that's a mystery for another day. At 6,000 Australian dollars, this watch is competing with a ton of the mid-range luxury market. I'll pop those conversion rates on screen again, and if you haven't already, please let me know down in the comments what you'd buy for that money. For me, I'd keep things a little weird. I'd probably go with something like the Ball Engineer Meteorite. It's currently 5,000 Australian dollars. I love meteorite dials, and I don't currently have any tritium in my collection, and this gives me both in a genuinely interesting package. Now, even though I wouldn't spend this kind of money on this watch, I do want to acknowledge why it exists. This is Casio taking one of its most iconic designs and asking what happens when cost is no object. Grand Seiko exists to represent the absolute best of what Seiko believes a watch can be, and in its own much stranger way, Mr. G does exactly the same thing for Casio. It isn't traditional luxury. There's no mechanical romance, Geneva striping through the caseback, or dial inspired by natural phenomena. It's just precision, durability, and industrial engineering turned up to 11. And we should encourage this kind of weird and wacky experimenting if we want watches to remain interesting. After all that though, my heart still said Tank, my budget still said G-Shock, and that's okay, because I love my resin 5600. But that's all for this week. I've been Johannes, this was White Tea Watches, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next one. Cheers.